StoryTrading is not an investment advisor. Investing in securities involves significant risk of loss. This presentation is being recorded. Parts of it will be posted up on our YouTube channel. Before we turn it over to Oliver, just want to point out, you can go to storytrading.com. If you click our little menu on the top right, click on VIP Performance, you'll see over there that OpGen was actually recommended by one of our contributors, Paulo Gonzalez, who's on the call here with us today and who facilitated this meeting with OpGen. So you can go check out our performance over there. We have about 50 plus stocks that are picked as VIP picks, and we've outperformed the indices by about 4 times over the past year. Here's a little quick stock chart for those of you not familiar with OpGen. And with that, last trade 236, I'm going to stop my share. And Oliver, you can take it over here with the prepared remarks, and then we'll do a little Q&A afterwards.
Perfect. Well, thanks, Ben, and thanks everybody for inviting me to talk to you guys today. First off, by way of personal introduction, Oliver Schacht. I've been in the molecular diagnostics industry for almost 25 years. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've started companies over in Europe as well as here in the United States. I've taken 2 companies public, done a number of M&A transactions, and taken a number of molecular diagnostics products through various regulatory approvals, both in Europe as well as the United States and China over the past 20 years. Now, looking at OpGen, first of all, I have to refer you to our forward-looking statements disclaimer. We are a publicly traded company. Ticker is OPGN. I will be making forward-looking statements during the course of this presentation, so please refer to this one in the course of the entire presentation as well as the Q&A session. And I'll refer you to all of our public filings with the SEC, the latest 10Q as well as 10K and all other filings. OpGen, we're a innovative company developing rapid infectious disease diagnostics, really targeting life-threatening infections. Now, a year and a half ago, this would have been an interesting conversation because few people might have been convinced that rapid molecular diagnostics, especially in infectious diseases, is really critical to the way we lead our lives here globally. I think the COVID-19 pandemic has demonstrated to everyone just how important and how critical rapid molecular diagnostics in the infectious disease world is. We've got fast solutions that deliver results in hours as opposed to days, sometimes weeks. They're very comprehensive, and we're addressing the pandemic that, in our view, has been underlying the current COVID-19 pandemic. In fact, has been going on for over 20 years, and that's the pandemic of gradually but slowly and surely rising antimicrobial resistance. We've got products and platforms that are on the market. We've got smart artificial intelligence powered bioinformatics, and we've made all of the platforms easy to use so that I, who have a finance background, no technical training whatsoever, can actually run this type of platform. We look at the platforms, the Univaro platform, which came into OpGen as part of the business combination that closed on April 1st, 2020, which is also when I became the CEO of OpGen. I'd been the CEO of Curetas for 10 years prior. That Univaro platform is FDA cleared. We've got pneumonia panels for lower respiratory tract infections on the market here in the United States today. We have a handful of products CE marked. We've got China approval already for the platform, and I'll be addressing the regulatory process, both in the United States as well as in China and elsewhere later in this presentation. Our Acuitas panels is currently pending FDA clearance. Again, I'm going to be talking to that in the course of the presentation. We also have leading bioinformatics. In fact, we have what we believe to be one of the world's leading databases and bioinformatics assets, combining tens of thousands of proprietary biomarkers of antimicrobial resistance that really is based on pharmaceutical industry, Merck Pharma, as well as Siemens work over many decades. We also have a global commercial presence. And again, I'll be addressing that later in the presentation. Now, we believe we're really well positioned to make best use of global opportunities in the infectious disease space. Now, what are we talking about? We're not talking about diseases that would bring you to your primary care physician. We're talking about life-threatening infections in hospitalized patients, often in intensive care units or on their way to intensive care units. Our key indication areas are pneumonia, complicated urinary tract infections, but also joint infections, intra-abdominal infections, and others. If you look at the market opportunity here, and we're just looking at hospitalized patients each and every year in the United States and Europe. So this excludes China, it excludes rest of world, just US and Europe. It's 9 million patients each and every year being hospitalized for one of these 5 disease areas. At an average selling price of typical molecular diagnostic products in these indications, somewhere in the $120 to $180 ballpark, so let's say $150, it's about $1.5 billion in total available market. So a very sizable market opportunity in life-threatening infectious diseases. Look at our proprietary platforms. Now, we can't obviously be an infectious disease diagnostics company and not talk, at least on one slide, about COVID. We're not, and I'll be very clear, we're not a COVID story. And we've strategically decided right at the beginning in March of 2020 to not go down the path of becoming a pure COVID play. We do have a COVID test. It's CE marked. It was developed in-house. It's regulatory-wise approved in Europe. We're selling it to distributors in Europe. We're also offering a regional Southern Germany testing service out of our own lab. That's part of our, let's call it, community effort. Our focus has been and continues to be on bacterial infections, hospitalized patients, some of whom, of course, are COVID patients. And here's a key theme, and we've presented data on this. If you look at all of the millions of patients that have been hospitalized with COVID globally, roughly 70 to 80% of these patients have received broad spectrum antibiotics. Now, we all know antibiotics do not work against the virus. They don't work against COVID. So when you look at the fact that only 7% to 14%, depending on which study you look at, of all COVID patients ever developed a bacterial co-infection, what has happened over these last 16, 17 months, we've been massively overtreating millions and millions of hospital patients with broad spectrum antibiotics. If nothing else, this will likely lead to aggravating the situation and compounding the problem of ever-growing antimicrobial resistance. We've published plenty of studies, and time again, they basically show that anywhere between 30% in some studies, as many as 85% of all patients, based on a rapid Univaro result, should have and would have received a very different course of antibiotic therapy. So we really gotta look long and hard at this this overuse of antibiotics that we're seeing at a pandemic level in order to prevent a situation where we're just run out of therapeutic options. Now, looking at our instruments, we're not an instrument company. Now, we've developed instruments. The Univaro systems have been developed by Curatus, an OpGen Group company. We don't manufacture them. In fact, Europe's largest electronic manufacturing service provider, who happen to make most of QIAGEN's instrument systems, and develop instruments and make them for large corporates such as Roche and many others, are making these instruments for us. We have a razor blade model whereby you place instrument systems, typically under what's called a reagent rental agreement. It's very typical in the diagnostics industry. And then we sell a regular stream of consumables, one-time use disposable tests, which is where all the business and the margin really is. All of the content, however, is ours. We develop the biomarkers, we develop our assays, and we take them through clinical trials and into the market. And we also manufacture all of our consumables ourselves. And for the Acuitas products, we're actually relying on third-party, well-established platforms. It's a Thermo Fisher QuantStudio, which is a platform that has been around for many years, developed and commercialized by Thermo Fisher. So again, not an instrument play, it's a content play and a consumable molecular diagnostics play. Looking at the 5 disease areas that we're active in, pneumonia being our lead program, urinary tract infection, as well as joint infections being the next ones up. In all of these 5 areas, we do have products that have already been developed, have seen regulatory approval in some geographies, or are pending approval in many others. Looking at the overview, our lead program in pneumonia, the product has been CE marked for a number of years. It's been FDA cleared, 2 products in 2018, and then in December 19, just weeks ahead of the shutdown due to the pandemic. So we've taken the platform, we've taken the cartridges through FDA clearance. We know what that FDA clearance entails, and we've done it before. The next 2 clinical trials that are scheduled are going to be in urinary tract infection, as well as joint infection. And we've guided in recent earnings calls to our expectation to start the UTI trial in the 3rd quarter of this year, here over the summer months, and then the joint infection trial towards the back end of the 4th quarter of this year. If you look at the 3 things that stand out about the Univaro platform, of course, there's a plethora of instrument systems and competition the likes of bioMérieux BioFire, or Genmark with the ePlex, soon to be Roche, QIAGEN with the QIAstat, and many others. The three things that stand out about Univaro, our platform. Number one, we can put more content in a cartridge than any of these competing platforms. That allows us to cover a broader array of pathogens, but also, and that's the second USP, we always have the broadest and clinically most relevant panels of antimicrobial resistance. Now, why is that key? The minute you know what the bug is, you want to know whether or not a certain antibiotic is still going to work. So you want to know the resistance profile. So in all of our products, and this has been in the makeup and DNA of OpGen, as well as Curetis for over a decade, all of our products are heavily focused not just on the pathogen ID, but on antimicrobial resistance. And the third piece, and that has to do with some proprietary technology in the platform, we have the ability to work from just about any native clinical sample. There's no need to pre-process your sample. You can go straight from anything that's liquid, like a urine or lavage, to viscous, to gluey, clumpy, sticky, all the way to solid pieces of tissue, bone cement. If it's good enough for microbiology culture, it's going to work on a Univaro system. And all of these sample types that you see on the slide have been clinically validated, are part of our label claim in the products, and have also undergone regulatory review. Now, you look at the pneumonia panel, or lower respiratory, here in the United States, that was a first in class. There's only one other company and one other platform out there today in the United States that has a panel for pneumonia, and that's BioFire. Clearly, they are a formidable competitor and sort of the 900-pound gorilla in our space, but we have a differentiated product. The Univaro LRT has additional pathogens, some of which are frankly some of the most underdiagnosed bugs, like pneumocystis, a fungus that historically, looking back at the 1980s, was often associated with immunocompromised, read, HIV/AIDS patients. The reality is, you can be heavily immunocompromised if you're a cancer patient or an organ transplant patient. And what we're finding is that in many studies, pneumocystis is just heavily underdiagnosed, and we're able to pick it up along with a very broad panel. We also have certain atypical bugs, but we also have the broadest coverage of key critical antimicrobial resistance on that panel. So again, while yes, there is another player out there with a pneumonia panel, this is a clearly differentiated product. If you look at the pipeline and the funnel in urinary tract infection, we have the first IVD cartridge-based system with a UTI cartridge on the market in Europe. We're already commercializing this here in the United States as research use only. And we also have the first joint infection panel on the market in Europe. Again, as I said earlier, we're going to be taking that through the clinical trials and the regulatory FDA process. Now let's talk about FDA clearance, because I know that's key and top of just about anybody's minds. And I'll be dead honest. In a normal year, we could have, would have, and frankly should have received FDA clearance for the Acuitas AMR gene panel about this time last year, maybe a few months later. The reality is the agency shifted deadlines. They were swamped with over 500 emergency use authorizations for COVID tests as a backlog. When we were informed, like the entire industry was informed in the fourth quarter of last year, that the FDA had suspended all reviews. The good news is that they came back at the end of January this year and told us that they had restarted the review. And I'm just going to, reemphasize and confirm what we have been talking about and have been stating publicly in our guidance. The FDA came back to us with a very clear timeline. We talked about that in our Q1 earnings call. They told us that within 120 days, which would have been the end of May, they wanted to give us all substantive feedback, and they've done so. They have come back with all documents. We've turned them all around, and we press released that. Everything's back in the FDA's court. And secondly, they gave themselves up to 210 days from the restart at the end of January, i.e. until the end of August this year. And that's their current expectation, which they have reiterated and reconfirmed, that is their current expectation, that they want to complete their review by then. Again, to me, in molecular diagnostics, barring any dramatic surprise, FDA processes are typically a yield to effort type thing. We've worked extraordinarily closely with the review team, on a weekly basis, sometimes multiple times a week. If you're down to reviewing documents and you're getting formatting of footnotes, suggestions, table formatting, a little, couple of words of disclaimer language here and there, that, they're literally looking at this How do you cross the T's and dot the I's to get this through the process? At the end of the day, it is in the hands of the FDA, and they can always come back with any additional questions. They have not come up with any new questions. They haven't raised any issues. They haven't requested anything in addition from OpGen at this point. And again, they have confirmed or reconfirmed their expectation of completing their review and getting towards that clearance decision here towards the end of August. If it's faster, we're all going to be pleased. Now, we as OpGen have done everything to prepare the market launch of the product. The marketing collateral is there. The sales organization has been trained. We have manufactured 3 batches of product under 3 different lot numbers. QC released them and then put them in quarantine, because unless and until I have that FDA clearance, I cannot put that final label sticker on the boxes and start shipping product. As we're going to be talking about the New York State project here in a moment, we already have a number of labs and hospitals who've been regular routine users of the Acuitas AMR gene panel for over 2 years. We also have a pretty good sense of where to go first in terms of the launch dynamics. So again, once FDA cleared, this would become the broadest ever FDA cleared panel of genetic antimicrobial resistance markers, covering potentially dozens of AMR markers and 9 classes of antibiotics. It is going to be a first in class and one of its kind type product to help trace and track outbreaks of these superbugs, multi-drug resistant organisms across hospitals and healthcare systems. Another key milestone that we've been talking about for months, and we're getting really close to getting towards that milestone, is a key development deliverable on our Univaro A30 platform. The current Univaro system is a $50,000 piece of equipment, takes 4 to 5 hours to result. Everything in this industry, in this space, is becoming smaller, faster, cheaper. The Univaro A30, which is based on an asset and a technology we acquired a couple of years ago, we've developed it to a point where it's going to be a sub 10,000 instrument. It's going to be results in 30 to 60 minutes, depending on the assay. Now, you're not going to be testing for 100 plus different parameters per test. You're probably going to be testing for up to 30. That platform we have talked about frequently. We'll get a series of pre-release instruments. Those instruments will be delivered by our instrument development and manufacturing partner, who will also be responsible for making the first up to several hundred instruments as we go to market. Those instruments will then be used for final verification and validation testing here over the coming weeks and months. And what we have also been talking about, in addition to obviously making this platform, the natural extension and expansion of our Univaro platform at OpGen, it'll also be a platform that we're considering strategically licensing and partnering. If you look at the last 4 or 5 months from the February 2021 acquisition of Mesa Biotech by Thermo Fisher for $500 million, Genmark being acquired by Roche, Hologic acquiring a European company, Mobidiag, Finnish-French company, for $800 million with a very similar platform. You kind of look at these types of assets. There's a scarcity. There is a finite number of these types of platforms out there. And we're very open to considering migrating third-party content onto this platform, and again, making it available under the appropriate type of either licensing or OEM type agreements. Those conversations are ongoing, but what is also clear, and I've been doing deals in molecular diagnostics with the likes of Roche, Abbott, Quest, QIAGEN, Sysmex in Japan, and many others for over 20 years. You strike the most lucrative and economically sensible deals when you have an asset that is fully baked. So with the balance sheet, and we're going to be talking about our balance sheet and cash position, in a much, much stronger position today than it was, say, 6 months ago. We're going to be pushing for these final development milestones because we're convinced that once we're doing these types of deals, they'll be strategically sound, economically more attractive to OpGen, and ultimately creating more value to OpGen shareholders. Looking at the bioinformatics side, and again, I'm going to be talking about some of the potential partnering opportunities here. When we acquired Ares, the asset from Siemens, we had about 11,000 bugs that were sequenced and data on 21 antibiotics. If you look at the Ares database today, it is what we believe to be the world's leading, broadest database in terms of genotype-phenotype correlation of proprietary genetic AMR markers. It covers over 55,000 bacterial pathogens and over 100 antibiotics that we have data on. That platform has been partnered and licensed to QIAGEN in a research use only setting, and QIAGEN's already commercializing that. We've also been working for quite a while with Sandoz, which is part of Novartis. They're the #1 global player in generic antibiotics. And we've been working with them to help them position some of their older traditional antibiotics with novel bioinformatics and data. And we've also been working with a number of diagnostic corporates. And again, I appreciate all the sense of urgency and the desire to get a deal done and get it done quickly. Again, 6 months ago, we probably would have erred on the side of doing a fast deal. Again, with the balance sheet where it is today, and there was a webinar here by Aris, just a day or two ago. There will be additional data presented here in the coming days. As we're getting much stronger data sets and we're launching additional products and solutions through Aris, we'll put ourselves in a position where these conversations with these interested parties would potentially lead to a much more attractive deal-making opportunity. So yes, we're moving forward, but we're going to make sure we do the right deal at the right time for the right set of economics. We talked about New York State. That's, again, where we have already deployed bioinformatics and a knowledge-based, cloud-based system in a routine setting with a handful of labs that are running the Acuitas AMR and are uploading data to the Acuitas Lighthouse. There's an affiliated number of 36 plus hospitals across the state of New York, including centers and healthcare networks like Northwell or NYU, in addition to the Wadsworth Lab. Clearly, COVID put a pause button last year onto testing. Since fall of 2020 and into the first half of this year, all of the sites across the state of New York have significantly ramped up testing, so they're generating valuable data, which is why we expanded and extended the relationship, and they're paying for it to the tune of about $500,000 here over the first it's the second and third quarter in 2021. We obviously want to make sure we have the data to then determine on how to best roll this out across the state of New York. That was being the strategic intent all along. And frankly, if it works in the state of New York, fundamentally, there's no reason why this type of approach of tracing and tracking genetically, genetic indicators of AMR shouldn't work in other states as well. In terms of the global commercial channels, again, just to remind everybody, we're obviously going direct here in the United States. And since everybody's been vaccinated on the OpGen team and customers allow you back in, we've been back out there talking to accounts. We've made additional Univaro placements. We're growing the franchise both in the pneumonia, lower respiratory, but also in UTI. Just point out, we will actually have another webinar with clinical data being presented by some of our Univaro accounts, University of Louisville. That's upcoming here in a couple of days. So invite everybody to tune into that as well. But I know everybody is also focused on what, in our view, is the key geographic expansion from a commercial standpoint, and that is China. Again, both in my previous company with Epigenomics, as well as with Curatus, and now with OpGen, I've been working for well over a decade in China. You'll appreciate that the United States FDA has been, should we say, less than transparent and have dragged their feet until a year in. They finally came back with a timeline. Safe to say that the Chinese regulators are probably a little more opaque. That said, in the fourth quarter of last year, we had certain final questions on the Univaro instrument system. We responded to those in the fourth quarter, October, November timeframe, and then the Chinese regulators went radio silent on us. No more questions, no more communication, neither to our partner nor to us. And then in the first quarter this year, we receive a package, a letter, which was the approval for the instrument, as we all know. So they're still sitting on the data, all of which we've provided, the data on the pneumonia panel, data from the United States FDA studies and approvals, data from all of the European CE marking, data from several large clinical studies done by key opinion leaders across the world, Europe, United States. We've actually recently seen a peer-reviewed journal publication, scientific publication, from a study that was done in China that our partner in China had organized and run at the Sino-Japanese Friendship Hospital in Beijing, which is one of the largest, most prestigious AAA hospitals in China. That data set, that was our first gut reaction, said, look, you've already got everything we have. Add that data set into the submission. We haven't heard any feedback or any additional questions. The Chinese regulators have sort of gone radio silent on us. Now, I have zero visibility, and I'll be dead honest, and we've said so repeatedly, we just flat out do not know what their timeline is. What we do know is they have not come back with any additional questions or concerns. And again, in my 20 plus years, I have taken products together with partners into the Chinese market. It always takes longer than one might like, but it is a relationship game and it is a long haul game. So we're going to be pushing hard, because once that approval is there, our partner who have footed the bill for these last several years on all of the studies, analytical testing, clinical testing, regulatory preparation and submission, working with CROs, they've paid for all of that. They're highly incentivized because they will have 8-year commercial exclusivity once Chinese approval is there, tied to very clear, and the agreement is public. I just refer everybody back to our S4 filing from February of 2020. There is an annex which includes pretty much the entire agreement. That agreement is signed. Once they launch, it becomes effective. 360 instrument system as a minimum over an 8-year period, and 1.5 million Univaro cartridges, based on the contractually agreed upon transfer prices. So this is not a licensing deal. We're manufacturing the product in Germany. We're selling those products to our Chinese partner at an agreed upon transfer price. Over that 8-year period, you're looking at roughly 180 million US dollars in today's foreign exchange rates in total revenue opportunity to OpGen. So clearly one of the absolute key growth drivers. We get it, we appreciate it, but there's also relatively little that you can do to speed things up unless and until we get a response and question, which of course we then turn around as fast as humanly possible. Additional regulatory approvals, for example, Colombia, are progressing and proceeding nicely. We've guided towards getting those regulatory clearances here in the second half of this year. And as best I can tell today, things are on track. So we're looking at continuing to expand that network of distributors and of course look at revenue generating potential there. With Mannarini, who've been our exclusive partners across 11 European markets, we're constantly also looking at strategic ways of expanding and extending that collaboration. Again, as soon as we have things that are signed, sealed, delivered, we'll obviously announce them to the world and let everybody know. But we're always looking at both geographic expansion, and they are active in not just Europe, they're also active in Asia Pac. They're also, a company that has brought over from DiaSorin a very seasoned executive team, both commercial as well as R&D in the diagnostics setting. So, I'm not going to exclude expanding the product scope, if you will, because today this distribution partnership with Mannarini is exclusively around the Univaro A30 platform. Of course, that could potentially be expanded as well. Looking at the financials, and again, it's always, when you look back and you look at the pro formas, it's a bit of an apples and oranges comparison, because there has been a legacy business on the OpGen side with fish products, which if you look a couple of years back was about $2.5 million worth of revenue. We've discontinued that business because it's no longer in the strategic focus of OpGen since the merger. We're focusing exclusively on molecular products. So that business has been discontinued. There's always some lumpiness in partnering and collaboration revenues. We've seen, strong quarters as well as weaker quarters. That really fluctuates depending on what deals you've got going on and what you're collaborating on. The product business has been growing and continues to grow. Clearly, a key focus here right now, commercial execution in the US, as well as obviously execution on the distribution side, and then getting into the Chinese market as soon as we're allowed. And of course, once we have FDA clearance on Acuitas AMR, that'll help contribute to top line revenue growth here in the United States as well. Our balance sheet has been dramatically changed. When we announced in September of 2019 to the world that we were combining OpGen with Curetis, we did a capital raise on the OpGen side back in October 2019, which I will admit was certainly not pretty, but at the time OpGen had a market cap of $5 million, and we raised $10 million. Since then, over the last 16 months, we've successfully raised $70 million. We raised a 10 million PIPE last November, 25 million registered direct, which was based on a single investor inbound interest in February this year. And then a warrant exercise and exchange deal, which took off some perceived overhang of warrants that were at $1.94 strike price, replaced them with significantly fewer warrants at a $3.56 strike price, and put another $9.7 million cash in the bank. So with just short of $40 million cash on hand at the end of Q1, we're in a position where, based on the guidance we've provided, and there's always the question, well, how long does that take you? What's the cash reach? What's the burn? Well, we've clearly guided to an expected quarterly cash burn of between $5 and $6 million in 2021, steady state. We've not provided revenue guidance because A, the regulatory approval timelines are unclear, and B, COVID has still been with us. But you think about this conceptually, what would it take over the coming years to get to a point where OpGen would become sustainably, so say cash neutral or even cash positive? Well, if you look at any analyst research and you look at the fact that you typically expect gross margins in molecular diagnostics somewhere in the 65 to 75% at scale, at the current size of organization and scale, you would anticipate that we'd roughly need somewhere between $30 and $40 million top line revenue, given those margin percentages, to get to cash neutrality. Clearly, that's not something we'd anticipate in the next 12 months, but looking at the research that's out there on OpGen, most people would sort of look at that and say, yeah, over the coming 2 to 3 years, that's certainly something well within reach. If you think about, again, FDA approvals coming through, Chinese approvals with associated significant revenue growth opportunities, as well as some of these partnering deals, which the upfront is a one-off, that's lumpy. But then as you move into a collaboration where you could really co-develop products, you'd have an R&D collaboration revenue stream, you'd work towards meeting clear milestones with defined revenue profiles there. And then, of course, in a licensing deal, you typically participate in terms of royalties off of future product sales of your partner and licensee. Currently, we've got 38.3 million shares outstanding. But if you look at the warrants and you look at the fully diluted number, we're hitting up against the ceiling of that almost 50 million shares, 49.8 fully diluted, which basically puts OpGen in a position, and that's frankly why we proposed to the shareholder meeting to approve the addition of authorized shares. We weren't looking at a transaction at this point, simply to get authorized shares, because in the absence of that, OpGen is basically in a position where we cannot use equity to either raise capital, to potentially refinance debt. If you look at our 10K and 10Q filings, you'll find that we have 18 million euros of total debt with the European Investment Bank, which becomes due in tranches. The first 10 million euro tranche plus accumulated interest will become due in the second quarter of 2022. There's a 3 million euro tranche in the second quarter of 23. And there is a 5 million euro tranche becoming due in the second quarter of 2024. So, one of two ways: either we repay debt with cash that we have on hand, which would drastically shorten the cash reach of the company to run clinical trials and commercialize products, or we would, negotiate a settlement of that debt with, equity and potentially issuing shares. Again, that's only possible once and if we have the authorization by the shareholders to issue those shares to the debt holder, the European Investment Bank. So clearly, from my perspective, the entire executive team, as well as the board, we believe it is not only in the best interest of OpGen, but it's frankly in the best interest of all shareholders to provide the company with the flexibility to issue those shares at the appropriate time in order to take care of debt financing, rather than frankly forcing the company to potentially use the 10 million authorized preferred stock that we do have already. They're authorized. That's certainly not a path we would prefer to go, but it is frankly a path that we're absolutely committed to going if there is no alternative. And obviously we've adjourned the shareholder meeting with regards to that one single item. 2/3 of those folks who have voted in favor of it, but we just didn't have enough votes. So, we're going to continue going there. And at the end of the day, we'll look at where this puts us. But again, we'll certainly consider making use of the preferred stock if that's the only route available to the company. In terms of operations, the merger integration, given the challenges of COVID's been a tough year, but the integration has gone really well. We've just actually successfully completed the move here in Maryland of our headquarters. We've reduced the size of our headquarter facility in half. We're saving over $600,000 a year. Moved from an old kind of really inefficient facility into a brand new facility that the landlord put almost $1.5 million in tenant improvements in and built it out to our specs. Didn't cost us a single dollar. And again, savings of $600,000 aren't chump change. With that, we're also looking at migrating or transferring manufacturing of the FDA approved products at scale over to Germany, where we have a fully functional FDA inspected clean room, high-end automated manufacturing facility, thereby avoiding the path of duplicating certain capital expenditure and investments and building another state-of-the-art manufacturing facility here. So, really making use of the infrastructure of the combined company, where we have capacity, we have a very experienced team, and quite honestly, looking at the cost base, it's significantly cheaper to manufacture those products over in Germany than it would be here in Maryland. Roughly got 110 folks. Still, there is still a lot of R&D. If you think about the clinical trials for urinary tract, the clinical trial for joint infection, the IRIS bioinformatics development, the A30 platform. So we're still in a development phase, but at the same time, we're in commercial mode. We're building out and have integrated the commercial teams here in the US with the old Curetis US team together with the OpGen team. It's now one integrated sales, marketing, customer service team. Talked about manufacturing, and we've kept the G&A side of things really lean for a publicly traded company with operations across the US and Europe. Total G&A team of 15 globally is, frankly, one of the leaner ones that I've seen. Board-wise, and Bill Rhodes, who's been chairman of Curetis for 5 years since the IPO back in 2015, has joined the OpGen board as its chairman. He was a former executive officer of Becton Dickinson. Prabha has been in the pharmaceutical space, developing novel antibiotics for close to 40 years. Initially with big pharma, likes of Abbott and Bristol Myers Squibb, and then she founded a number of companies, was CEO of a NASDAQ listed company, Sempra Pharmaceuticals. She's currently chairing a national science advisory board here in the United States to the US government, as well as chairing a World Health Organization task force on antimicrobial resistance, an absolute recognized thought leader and powerhouse in all things fighting AMR. Don Elsey and Mario Corvetto, two finance CFOs with plenty of public company, NASDAQ listed company experience. So a really good group of folks, together with Tim Deck, our CFO, who's been the OpGen CFO for 6 years, and Jan Bacher. Jan and I have worked together for over a decade. He is one of the original co-founders of Curetis. He's been doing this for 14 years at Curetis, now OpGen. He started working in Hewlett Packard Medical some 25 plus years ago, worked at Agilent, worked at Philips. He's taken platforms through development and operations, clinical trials, as well as regulatory approvals. And again, between Jan and the team, they have successfully taken multiple products through the FDA. So I'm going to say it's a team that has the experience, the relationships, and has sort of the sense of how to get these approvals done. They're never easy. They're never as fast as one would like, but I have full confidence in the team getting the job done. We've obviously been putting out quite a bit of news here, whether it's being clinical data, whether it's being financings, and I appreciate a bunch of the commentary that's out there on quote unquote fluff PRs. I understand the desire to get the FDA approval, get the China approval, get the deals. Look, I'll be the first one to write that PR myself and get the word out there as soon as these things are done. But in the meantime, we have tremendously exciting scientific and clinical data. And rest assured, that clinical data is what ultimately drives strategic partner interest. The large IVD corporates and the large players in this platform space will not be swayed by any fancy PR, whether it's the deal. They're looking at the fundamentals. They're looking at the technology. They're looking at how solid it is, and they're looking at data. So the more data we can get out there, backed by top-notch clinicians here in the United States and Europe and globally. Again, talking about the China study that was recently published in a peer-reviewed international journal. That's the type of data that will help drive partnerships. It's true for the Univaro platform. It's true for ours genetics. So, indulge us when we put out those types of data. It's not, because we love putting out press releases on just data. It's because that is the validation that our strategic partners are looking for when they're making up their minds whether OpGen is the right partner and whether the platforms that we develop have what it takes to become truly successful on a global scale. So with that, we've got a number of upcoming catalysts. Talked about the FDA clearance. Look, end of August is what we've been told by the agency. If it's sooner, we'll let everybody know ASAP. We're launch ready. That next launch will become coming right on the heels of that clearance. China, it is anybody's guess. From the last questions on the instrument to the instrument approval was roughly 4.5, 5 months. So we'll need to see and just stand by and listen closely. Again, no new questions have come up. We'll be announcing the initiation, the start of clinical trials in complicated urinary tract infection, here expected in the third quarter, and then for joint infection towards the fourth quarter, end of the year. We'll be making sure to announce hitting key milestones on the Univaro A30 side, as well as obviously any partnering deal, licensing deal, and strategic deal that presents itself as an opportunity as soon as those deals are done. And with that, I'll open it up to questions. More than happy to answer as best I can, and hopefully this has given folks a bit of flavor and feel of, frankly, on the one hand, the passion, the drive that we as a team bring to this. Of course, the challenges, but again, this is not my first rodeo. It's not Tim's or Jan's or anybody else in the leadership team's first rodeo. We've done product development, we've done clinical trials, we've done regulatory approvals. We're going to be bringing those platforms to market.
Great. Thank you, Oliver. That was an awesome presentation. You hit all of the important parts we look for, especially on capital structure, catalysts. I really appreciated that commentary. Make sure to follow us on StoryTrading, YouTube, StoryTrading, Twitter. Really helps us out, increase our reach. So appreciate it if you do that. And thank you very much, everyone. We will see you next week.